Thank you very much for coming for breakfast, and welcome to the New York Times and to this morning's breakfast session hosted and enabled by Veolia. My name is Stephen Dunbar Johnson, and as President International at the Times, I will be attempting to navigate us through this morning's theme, which is turning the policy tap for sustainable water. So to try and put some context on this topic and its urgency, as of this month, according to the US Drought Monitor, nearly 30% of the US was classified as experiencing moderate or exceptional drought. Furthermore, at least 5 cities, Los Angeles, Miami, Phoenix, Atlanta, and El Paso, for a host of different reasons, have been flagged as potentially running out of water altogether in the not too distant future, unless remedial action is taken. And water insecurity is estimated to have cost the US $8.5 billion in lost labor and productivity just this year. So there are, I think, multiple factors that go into creating this situation, but perhaps the 4 main pillars are water quality, or lack thereof, water infrastructure that is no longer fit for purpose, water affordability, and a fragmented water grid. And the climate science suggests that the pressures and the societal and economic costs of solving for this are only going to intensify. So there is a real urgency of action required here. So let's call that the dissatisfaction with the current state of affairs. I'm hoping during the next 40 minutes or so, we can get into the vision of how we can tackle this and the policy initiatives, the processes, and actions that are needed to facilitate solutions. Solutions being the operative word. And to tackle this, we have a terrific panel comprising of Professor Kartik Chandran, who is Professor of Earth and Environmental Engineering at Columbia University. Thank you for joining us, Professor. We have Estelle Brashlianoff, if I could get that right, Estelle.
Well, that was perfect
in the end, who's the CEO of Veolia, who, as you know, have enabled this morning's discussion and are clearly one of the world's leading water companies. And we have Kristen Hughes, the Chief Sustainability Officer at Diageo, who we can describe here as a company that is water reliant, I think, in that I don't believe, as a too frequent consumer of their products, that it produces a single product that doesn't contain water. So let's get into it. I think this group, where we have an academic who spends his life thinking about these things, we have a company that's water reliant, and we have a company that is in the water business. I think we have a very interesting cocktail, shall we put it like that?
I'm happy with that word.
Yeah. Can I start, Professor Chandran, with you? You, as an academic, are looking at the water challenge, as I said, holistically. Could you talk to us about what you think are the key water challenges in the US for each of the 4 pillars that I referred to?
Yes, thank you, Stephen. It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me. I'm not checking the stock quotes. I'm just making up for my poor memory. So in terms of water quality, if you just take a look at the United States, it's almost a model of contradictions and a really a model where we cannot really generalize too much. But if we break down the aspect of water quality or lack thereof, essentially, the overall landscape of the United States, in terms of water quality, not drinking water, but water quality overall, is almost entirely governed by the Clean Water Act that protects the quality of the receiving water bodies. And the Clean Water Act is, perhaps in my opinion, has single-handedly afforded the United States as a whole the luxury of adequate water of a certain quality. And so in a place, let's say along the northeastern side of the United States, we have the luxury of essentially tapping into near pristine surface waters for everything, but that's the mistake then. And so we use the same surface water for drinking with minimal treatment or some treatment, and then we use the same, just to kind of not exaggerate, but on the other end of the spectrum, we use the same quality water for flushing our toilets. And that kind of totally perhaps clouds the overall question, the aspect of water quality. We have good quality water for the most part, but then we are not connecting the quality to the right objective. And I think we can do a lot better in some parts of the US. There are other parts of the US which are not as blessed, and there we need to rely on technologies, for instance, desalination and different forms of water reuse. And so that's on water quality. But the one message perhaps that I can introduce now in the context of water quality is that we should really we should consider the following fact. In this country, in the US, we consume per capita per day 100 gallons per capita per day, which is about 400 liters per capita per day. Of that, we don't drink enough. We drink about 2 liters per capita per day. And that's what so that's the amount, that's the fraction that we need to get up to drinking water quality. The other 398 liters, we don't have to get up to drinking water quality. That can be of different, with different characteristics and different quality.
So help me just unpack that a bit. The first part of that, the surface water is the quality water, and we're also using that to flush our toilets. So
after treatment, yes, yes.
And that's not unique to the United States, though, is it?
That's not unique to the United States, but there are other countries where there is a big disconnect between that use model. Tap water is still available, but the quality of the tap water is not fit for drinking. And so these populations these countries' populations use that water for everything except drinking and cooking. And they buy bottled water for drinking, unfortunately in big plastic containers, but that's the model.
I will come back to that. Estelle, from Veolia's perspective, what are the current challenges and pressing issues here in the US that you're seeing?
So I guess here in the US and everywhere in the world, we are really a worldwide company present on all the continents. Quality and quantity, really both. And it's not by chance that we see more extreme events, droughts followed by floods, almost in the same places at times, because it's the exact consequence of global warming. It is on water. Too much water, too little water, not at the right time, not of the right quality. So it goes with a lot of consequences, typically on insurance costs. 20% of the Americans have seen their insurance costs go through the roof in the last few years, exactly because of that. So it's already hurting even quality of living and, and the wallets in this country, which is super important. And if I talk about quality, we've conducted a survey in this country, and actually more than 70% of the Americans say water quality and drinking safe water is of the utmost importance for them. And it even outranks everything else from, getting to the right school, quality schools, to the right health system. And it's not talked enough, so I'm very happy that we're here today, because when you go in the streets, that's exactly what people are talking about and what they expect there will be solution delivered. So it's happening here and now, and we have to talk about solution as quickly as possible.
But that concern that you say is on the street, it's not being reflected on the political agenda. Why is that? Why is it not being spoken about in this current campaign, for example, if water is such an urgent issue?
I guess the current campaign is going to be over in a very few weeks' time, so I guess we can think about the next few years as opposed to just the next few weeks. So I think, I would welcome that we have a big debate in the US about what do we do as a country on those subjects. Debate would involve politicians, they would involve companies like us, who can say, okay, what's possible, what is not, and what can we do. We have, in a way, a duty collectively to be able to protect health, to protect actually the resource and the security of supply, and to protect as well the earnings and I guess of everybody in this country, to make it affordable for water, and that's exactly what a company like Veolia, our innovation, our know-how, our presence on all continents is just here to protect that. But we have to have a bit of a coalition of good willing forces to make it happen.
Again, we're going to come back to what that coalition looks like or should look like. Kristen, as I mentioned, you're a water-reliant company. You're also operating in globally. How many countries are you in?
180.
180 countries. Water is so essential to you and the stewardship of water. Can you let us know how Diageo are thinking about this and what are the sort of core pillars of your sustainability policy?
Yes, thank you. It's fascinating because, as you mentioned, I mean, Diageo, we do need water. It is by far the most important ingredient that we put into our quality products that hopefully most of you enjoy at home on a regular basis. But because it's so vital, we recognize that having access to quality water is essentially our license to operate. And we want to ensure that where we operate, we're also supporting the communities. So you may think that in some of the places where we're creating product, we're in places like India, Kenya, Mexico. These are very dry countries. And so we want to ensure that we're also not taking water out whilst communities don't have the water available. So we have a number of different ways that we approach this, and through different innovations and with the community, we have both the stewardship, so we're investing in water replenishment as well, so working with organizations like TNC and WWF to ensure that we can actually bring as much water and ensure that as much water is staying in those communities as well as what the water is that we're taking away. We also have some really interesting innovations, in particular in Mexico. We're looking at agave plants that we are farming. We're able, through drone technology, to look at one plant at a time to understand exactly how much water is needed, how much other vitamins are needed to keep that plant growing in a healthy way. And then, so a little drone comes and does that plant-by-plant analysis, and the mother drone comes behind and gives exactly the amount that's needed. So we can use those drones at night as well, so it's not super hot. It's a lot cooler, so we're using less water. We're much more efficient that way. And then it's also safer, so we don't have workers out planting or watering at night when there are also coyotes or other dangers about. So we've actually instituted human rights and a human social positive side, whilst also trying to reduce the water usage around the agave.
So technology is obviously needs to play a big role in helping solve some of these pressing problems. But it's also interesting to think about how countries that are water poor, where it's such a precious resource, how they look at their water husbandry. And so could you speak to that, Professor, in terms of both how you see technology helping going forward, and also what we should be learning from other parts of the world?
Yes. So currently, again, if we can start just in the US, technologies are geared towards, we have a very good regulatory structure which is enforced. And so technologies are geared towards at least getting to that level. And that's interesting because with advanced utilities, like for instance, New York City Department of Environmental Protection, we use fairly advanced technologies here to convert the wastewater from 8.4 million or so people into streams which are fit to be discharged into, ironically, more polluted water bodies like the Hudson River and the Long Island Sound. But since we are meeting regulations, that's okay. That's okay. Perhaps not entirely acceptable, but that's okay for now. But there has always been, we do this while increasingly paying attention to the overall carbon footprint of these technologies. So we want to get to clean water, but also minimize the overall carbon footprint, not just carbon dioxide, but gases like methane and nitrous oxide, which are more specific to the water sector than carbon dioxide actually is. Okay, but we are also realizing, and not just in New York City, but in many cities around the world, even outside the US, that the conventional model, the traditional model of there being one centralized wastewater treatment plant to which, let's say, a few million people feed their sewage through a connected network, a piped network, may not be the most efficient, may not be the most reliable, given increasingly unpredictable climate patterns and other externalities and uncertainties, access to energy, access to operating demands, chemicals, nutrients, and so on and so forth. So something that we can learn, and this is actually happening more and more so in the US as well, what we can learn, especially from other communities, is how to perhaps extend and expand our centralized models, technologies, towards more, let's say, a hybrid of decentralized, distributed, and centralized models. That opens up the opportunity for more localized reuse. Perhaps again, going back to the non-potable reuse, we don't need to produce drinking water at that scale. There are buildings in New York City, down near Battery Park, and a few other boroughs in New York City, where some of these buildings are offsetting about more than half their water demand by simply, not simply, but by treating locally the wastewater and then channeling that back, and not for drinking. That's something on the wastewater side.
Channeling it back to what? For using on the land, or?
Yeah, exactly. For process water, process heating and cooling, irrigation, and washing as well. This is something that we can learn from other countries. These technologies have been driven by other pressures, other challenges outside the US, but I think we need to bring some of these in, but again, within that regulatory structure.
Yeah, yeah. So Estelle, we're on the brink of a fairly momentous election here in a few weeks. As the chief executive of a water waste management company, what kind of, and I know we're steering into dangerous waters here, but excuse me, but what kind of policies would you be looking for from either a Harris administration or a Trump administration?
Just a few things. I don't think we are a water company. I think we're quite unique, the largest and the leader, if I may. Why do I say that? Why do I say that? But I think it's important because we combine global presence, super strengths. We are the largest, and I could give you figures, but I'm not as interested as you would expect. Of course, we're present on all continents. We are present on all types of technologies, including the one you mentioned, through to operations, so managing networks and be efficient. And the interest of all that is we have the size, we have the breadth to be able to innovate, to spend money in R&D, to find always new solutions, together with adapting them to the community's needs. Because you don't do exactly the same things in the US that you would do in Chile, where you operate the water from Santiago de Chile, in Mexico, where we are, in Colombia, in China, or in Australia, or in Europe. Of course not. Nevertheless, you have a series of common tools which exist to solve kind of the problems we've just highlighted. So I guess the scale, the breadth of experience and knowledge, but adapted to specific community needs. And that's really the two which goes alongside, and that's why I'm so proud of running this company as well. In the solutions, we have some which, like are exactly the one which were mentioned, like water efficiency is one. I don't think it is this country which has invented so many things and which is so much in advance in innovation, in technical aspect, that there is a water leakage between 40 and 50% in the network distribution. I'm sure this country can do better than that. And there are tools existing, including digital tools to detect the leaks when they happen, and so on and so forth. Another one would be water reuse. Do we need to cleanse the street with drinking water? No, we don't. Do we need to go into, boiler water to serve a big industrial boiler with potable water? Of course not. It's another quality of water. And water reuse and recycling, for instance, is an element of the jigsaw which can be very helpful in this country. You mentioned industry, rightly so. I don't know if everybody realizes in this room that industry consumes twice as much water as the population in the world. So it's for the processes purpose. One industry which is consuming a lot of water, for instance, is mining, including lithium mining. Lithium, you need lithium for the energy transition, as we all know. And in the batteries, there is always lithium. You need 1.5 million gallons million gallons of water to extract 1 ton of lithium. This is enormous. You talk license to operate. We have a company, the customer of ours in Australia, which wanted to expand and double the size of their mine, the lithium mine. They didn't have the authorization from their local council to extract 1 drop of water more, which, you can visualize Australia as not exactly having water all day long in such a big amount. We manage with all our technology to be able to do that, with recycling part of it, cleaning with evapocrystallization together with an active flow. I can go through the details of the technology involved if you wish, but that's a very good example. So I think some of the solutions, and water efficiency is one which is far on front ones. So it's really key. And when I talk quality, this country talks a lot and is quite in advance in the PFAS, realization.
In the what realization, sorry?
PFAS, so the perfluorate, the forever chemicals, depends how you call, compared to other parts of the world. And we have an end-to-end solution to treat PFAS at the most affordable way possible, because you pronounce the word affordable, and I think efficiency goes with affordability for everyone. We need to ensure that in this country, we use innovation and everything we have to protect human health, the resource, as well as again, the purchasing power of the population.
So, as chief executive of the world's largest water company, you've just
better as well.
you've just articulated very clearly that you, and rightly, that you have the solutions, you have the technology, you have the know-how to bring all these things together. Mm-hmm. But with respect, you didn't, the policy aspects, how do we, and then this is a subject for today, the policy, how do we find, what are the policies required to allow this to be put into action?
You have 2 ways of answering your question. The first one will be to say, basically, we need a big project in this country to tackle the problem we've just seen, a big ambition. Maybe, I think the reason why we haven't seen it so far is because, this country didn't need it. Let's be honest. As in, we didn't realize before the various, events we were all experienced, that, it was so scarce, it was probably problematic, and you could have a problem of, an industrial company not being able to expand their factories or not even able to expand. So I think, the realization moment has happened, and probably we're more ready than ever. And that's why we wanted to test it, the general public and the population on that one, and that's very clear. So I guess we need a big collective project in this country. And then it will be down to local communities as well. So there is, again, the big project and adaptation to local communities. If I had to pick one specific, it would be maybe water reuse and water efficiency, because it's a no-brainer. Technologies exist, the need exists. So let's say you would have an objective of increasing by 10% the water reuse in this country in the next 5 years. It's not massive. That would make a big difference already. So set an objective and have a few people, I guess, spreading the word and the message. But I think, the population is more ready than what many politicians think they are.
Kristen, do you agree with that? That the people are more ready than the politicians?
I would say yes. I actually grew up during the Clean Water Act that was referenced earlier, and actually the country is ready, and it's been decades since that was implemented, and actually it still continues to have knock-on effects. I think where we probably need to see shifts in any population is the way that we utilize water, our reliance on cleaning the streets with the clean water versus a recycled water. I mean, at Diageo, we use the 4 R's when it comes to thinking about water. So there's reducing our water. So how can we be more efficient when we distill on site? So we've got all sorts of reverse osmosis and other capabilities, technologies, sensors, actually, that are allowing us to know if there's a leak somewhere so we can address it immediately, which might actually solve that problem you were talking about earlier. The second one is really on reducing, on recycling the water, much like you were saying. So reusing water, that we can use water, and it doesn't have to be clean water for cooling or heating. So when you think about steam, because it's not going directly into a food product. And then the third is that recycling bit through the wastewater treatment that you were also describing. You've been, of course, you're a key leader in that space, but there's that capability. Then we use this on site for us to be able to get it, and you have it here, and almost every municipality has that capability. And then for us, that fourth is also then the replenishment. So we're also trying to always give back as much water as we use. So, but where I see some shifts is that need, and sometimes I think we as a population around the world want that clean water for everything. And so if we can actually think about what can reused water be used for versus having that pristine water, and the pristine then can be used for food grade safe products as well as drinking water, but then your cleaning water can actually be a little bit different, right? And so that's what we see. We use a lot of reused water on site for all of the cleaning, and again, as I said, also the recycled water into the cooling and the steam. So I think there are a lot of different ways that we can actually capture water utilization in a way that would be much more beneficial than we probably now currently use. And it's not just this country, but I think there are a lot of different countries we could learn from. I'd also say in the US, I mean, you talked about this in your opening remarks. There's a microcosm here. There's a really interesting way that we can learn for so many of the other global impacts of water. So you've got water shortages in these 5 cities you mentioned, as well as the Southwest, but also plenty of places here in the US where you often have floods, and then the impacts of hurricanes. I think there's one about to hit now, right? So I do feel like there's this opportunity to do quite analysis of the US to understand how various geographies are utilizing water, and then to take those learnings even to other parts of the world.
Mm-hmm. Professor, same question to you about policy, actually. What do you think would be the 1 or 2 policy things that would really make a difference here in the United States?
So let's start with the two big policy buckets that influence water in the US. So one is, as we've been discussing, the Clean Water Act that protects the quality of the receiving bodies. And then the second one is the Safe Drinking Water Act, which directly caters to potable, fit for human consumption. They have never been or rarely been connected or never been connected at the policy level. And so we are in this relentless pursuit of drinking water, let's say to flush our toilets. And then we are in this relentless pursuit of making sure that we are putting in near drinking quality water into, let's say, the Hudson River. That has, if we could find a way to connect those 2 pillars at the policy level. We talk about the Clean Water Act. If I can use the same acronym, perhaps we should start thinking about the Circular Water Act, and that's a version 2.0 of what perhaps we are thinking. And when we, thank you, and this impacts now not just drinking, but one of the biggest consumers of water actually around the world is agriculture. And we don't have to mine groundwater, which is becoming the biggest challenge, and perhaps not to the extent in the US, but in many other countries around the world. Food production is being compromised by the lack of groundwater, accessible groundwater. And we are discharging pathogen-free wastewater laden with nitrogen and phosphorus, which could be turned around for agriculture. And so it's that circularity, perhaps, if that can be instituted at the policy level, that will be very good. There are, again, very briefly, there are some examples. Outside the US, any new developments, residential developments, need to have on-site treatment. But it's not on-site treatment and then exporting that water, but it's that localized reuse, as you mentioned. That, I think, is key. There are some cities where such policies are coming in. San Francisco, through the Public Utilities Commission, is a good example, where there are many buildings with localized reuse systems, on-site treatment and reuse. So it's that connection which I think, from the policy side, that could change the game.
Stephen, can I
Yeah,
make a
please,
quick
yeah.
point? Actually, it's so interesting, and I want to just make sure everyone understands. When we talk about wastewater treatment, you practically could drink the water that comes out of it because of the technologies of firms like Veolia that they've created. So it's not dirty water. It's just that right now, but I think people have this, when you think about wastewater, I think that people immediately go to a negative. It actually is really quite clean water, and when we see it come out, it is practically potable. You could practically drink it. So when we're thinking about cleaning or using that for agriculture purposes, it's not dirty, messy water. So I just wanted also to make that point, because sometimes I think people think, wait, you're about to put that into, you're on the streets, but it's not. It's actually quite advanced, the technologies that help us
you can
treat
do,
it.
and you have the technology which is just enough to make it to the usage. You can have anything from the quite simple to the super technological. That's why the affordability element, depending on the usage, is the right balance to be struck. We can have the technology. We have the technology to be able to basically make drinking water of pretty much anything. Actually, in the Greater Paris area, we drink the River Seine, which is the equivalent of the Hudson River. Would you drink the Hudson River directly? No, probably not. But we have all the technologies, so if you had to, we could do it and be very, very safe for everybody's health in this room.
Do people in Paris drink Chateau Seine? Seriously?
That's a good idea. What about we publicize what we do? And by the way, of course, tap water is 1,000 times less expensive than bottled water.
Cool.
So again, I'm insisting on the community affordability element. Because Chateau Seine, at the price of, I don't know, I should find another one, which is 1,000 times less expensive. So yes, you're able to do a lot with technology, but just enough so to meet the standards, but not too much so that you keep it affordable.
So we know that the technologies that and a lot of people living in Paris or in London drinking water that's been already heavily recycled. So is it about education, communication? What are you doing about, or are you doing anything to help consumers understand that this is perfectly acceptable? It's cheaper, it's better for the environment. We've got younger people are much more environmentally aware.
No, it's just, we don't have any problem with that. Do we publicize it? No. But it's become the norm in some places, like I did say. In the middle of the summer in Barcelona, which is facing a lot of droughts in the recurring way, you have a third of the water in your tap which comes basically from a desalination plant, a third of the tap which comes from recycled water, treated, of course, recycled water, and a third which comes from a more traditional, say, like spring water. And that's it. That's the norm. That has become the norm, precisely because the thing is, water has become something precious. I would say symbolically, more so than, of course, I'm not talking about bills here. I'm talking about the symbol, and everybody cares about you would save it. That's why 40 to 50% leakage rate. There is something we can do better about that as well. And industry, because we've talked about population, but industry. Just to give an idea, the most excited people to talk to Veolia about our technology to help them with water in this country are actually data centers. Because you know what? You need water to pull down data centers. And if you look at the map in this country or where the data centers are, or are located, or are meant to be implemented in the next few months, and if you look at the map of water scarcity, there is almost a perfect match. Therefore, this is a license to operate. If they don't get water, you know what? They won't be in competition with population. Of course, the local council will, of course, prevent that from happening. Therefore, they just have to recycle water. So I guess this is a way to unlock as well the growth, as in the economic growth in this country, and to make it happen in a sustainable way. So I think that's not, we're not here only we're not here to save the planet. We're here to talk about the human beings, on the surface of the planet, and the industries which goes with the wealth which this country creates.
And in terms of the policy making, though, we're talking about city level, we're talking about state level, and we're talking federal.
Yes.
So, because if you look at the size of the United States and the 5 cities I mentioned at the top, the potential water crisis of those cities is for very different reasons. So Miami, it would be about salination, seawater getting into the aquifers. Atlanta, because of population growth and the pressure of population on the infrastructure. Phoenix, because there's not enough water. LA, because they can't capture the water that does fall, or they don't capture it. So very different reasons, and therefore, I assume different policy requirements for different places. So how do you do that? What is the most effective way of marrying between state, city, and federal policy?
My opinion, it's not only about policy, it's about delivery. So you need, that's why I was talking about, aligned interest. You need politicians to decide what they want for their city, or again, above. You need the EPA to set standards. You need the city mayor to decide what they want for their city, what are the priorities, and so on and so forth. Of course, everybody has their role to play in that. But you need as well the private sector and companies to be on the delivering side, on the innovating, on the make it happen in the most efficient way possible. That's what a company with the broad of experience I've just highlighted that will bring. I'm not here to say to the mayor of Los Angeles what should be done in his city. You know what? I can say, I can bring along, all the experience we have in other cities which have faced the similar type of crisis and say, okay, some of them have done that. But in the end, it's not for a private company to decide what. But we're here to help with the delivery in the most efficient way possible, to innovate, to put our technologies and know-how to the service of that project. That's the way I see it.
So you can specify, help identify the problems and come up with a smorgasbord of solutions for that particular.
And I know that I've had discussion with some of the people in this country, in Santiago de Chile, where we operate the global distribution water and the wastewater as well. It's a major city. It's a 6 or 7 million inhabitant city, so it's a large one. The river, which used to feed the population with water, minus 75% river flow in the last 10 years. Basically, it doesn't snow on the Andes anymore in the winter. So it doesn't melt anymore. So the river flow has reduced dramatically. And we've developed a series of things together again, with the communities here, which goes from water efficiency, water reuse, and maybe in 10 years we will need a water desalination plant, but we're trying to push the time of needing it for a later date because it's expensive. So each year we gain, if you want, is a year, which is gain for the population. So that's the type of discussion we've had with other parts of the world. We are super interested to see what we've developed in Barcelona, Santiago, or what we've developed in water reuse in Los Angeles, in West Basin. We have a very, very large project with 6 different qualities of water, depending on the use, from boiler for a refinery through to, I can't remember what, and actually agriculture usage as well.
And do you have, and this is, I guess, a question for all of you, do you have examples of, you're both operating in multiple countries, of countries that are like best practice in terms of policy that you think could be examples?
Well, I think as Estelle said, we don't necessarily always looking to influence policies, but we are, I like your question on best practice, because actually what's really interesting when you ask that first question around, you have to talk to the city, and then there's the state, and then there's the federal in the US, right? But one of the things when we were designing our distillery in Shelbyville for Bulleit Bourbon, we worked very, very closely with the county around Shelby and the city of Shelbyville, specifically on water use, because what we didn't want was to be taking water from a municipality that either we couldn't give back or that, again, we're taking from this community. So we worked really, really closely with that community. However, once you start building something in an infrastructure, the federal gets really interested too. So we also had the senators of Kentucky then were really interested in what was happening in this space. Even though the water itself is so localized, it is also a state issue, and then it's also that federal issue, as you mentioned. So, and then the governor was involved. So you actually had quite a multi-layered approach. So we also wanted to make sure all of them understood what our plans were, how we were approaching it, and ensure everybody was aligned more or less. And many of you will probably know Kentucky is a red state, so it's really Republican, but actually there's a Democratic governor. I might get that. I think that's, and so there was this balance even of politicians supporting this initiative where we were looking to build in Shelbyville. So that's not directly the answer to your question when you're saying countries by countries that are using this, but I just wanted to go back to that initial point. I think when we look at countries that are doing this well or trying to do it well, I think a lot of them are already suffering from water stress. So I think that you're already understanding. So when we have countries that aren't water stressed, they don't necessarily feel that impetus to move now. And so, but there are others that are looking at this. India is thinking about actually a requirement that you must replenish twice as much water as you use if you're there as an industry player. Oops, sorry. So there are others that are exploring these potential policies, I think, that can actually lend. And there's a number of different regulations, whether that's through tax relief and investments and others sharing some of that support, because you do have quite a few companies that are looking to invest, that are looking to do the right thing in partnership with the government, in partnership with NGOs and other colleagues and peers and competitors. So we recognize, like you said, I mean, water flows, right? So it's not necessarily a boundary issue, but it is very localized. So we go from that local space, but then also understanding the global and regional policies that can support.
Yeah, water flows. It's weird, isn't it? Because it's localized, but it actually flows everywhere.
Yeah.
I'm going to open. There's a lot of smart people in this room who've got, I'm sure, questions and ideas on this subject of policy. So we're going to open it up in a second. But before we do, I want to push you a little bit. Come back to this this election that's about to happen. Would you be so? Which administration is going to be better for the for this? Let's just cut to the chase for this issue on policy.
I think I need to go to another breakfast.
I would answer the question a little bit differently. As in, I was asked a lot of times, if it were X or Y being elected in November, would it change anything for Veolia in the US?
Yeah.
And
that's a better question.
I genuinely think the answer should be no, not really. Not as a citizen of the world, where of course everybody has their opinion, but as a head of a company like Veolia. Because what? Whether you vote Republican or Democrat in November, you want to have a safe water to drink at home. Affordability is key. And you want to have the wealth creation linked with industries and with, the GDP, which needs water and therefore water efficiency to be able to have, I don't know, data centers. And whether you vote Democrat or Republican, it's exactly the same type of needs that you have. Therefore, it's really a transpartisan, in my opinion, need that this country faces, which is based on the reality of the facts, global warming, whether you I guess, vote X or Y, is happening here now, and therefore we already see the consequence on water scarcity and water quality. As I said in the survey, the PFAS, so the forever chemicals, is something which is very, very important and first and foremost for all Americans, whatever they vote in November.
That's a very diplomatic way of putting it. But the EPA needs to play a critical role, though. I mean, if the EPA has... No, you don't think so? Professor?
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt, but
No,
I would agree. Given the regulatory, the legislative framework that already exists, and the effort and the time that it takes to reverse something like that, and the complexity, I think the regulatory structure, the enforcement model here in the US, I think is mature enough to not just survive, but also perhaps go beyond that, irrespective of the consequences of the election in the short term, and perhaps in the long term at least. So overall, I think I actually agree.
Right.
EPA by its, so we have seen more recently what happened to the EPA about 8 years ago, and then correspondingly what happened 4 years ago, where for the first time, after about 45 years, there was a big push towards better infrastructure as a whole, including water infrastructure. But these things happen over the time span that is beyond individual governments. So I think we are safe.
It's interesting that you mentioned EPA, because actually probably the agency we work the closest with is USDA, so agriculture.
Yeah.
And so, even on water issues, they are very, very involved in trying to help farmers understand better farming techniques, to utilize less water, to reuse and recycle water. And so we're working directly with farmers in corn in particular for bullet bourbon, but also for barley in the Midwest that also goes into quite a number of our products. So it's really quite fascinating to me. EPA, certainly I can appreciate the role they might play, but for us it's the agriculture agency.
That makes sense.
Yes.